Hello, everyone. This is another episode with Candid Craic. Today we have Neelam. How are you doing today?
Hi, Oscar. I'm great. How are you?
Really well. And on the other side, we have Richard as well. Richard, how are you doing?
I'm not bad at all, Oscar.
Fantastic. So, for the people that are new to Candid Craic, explain to me, Neelam, a little bit more about yourself, your background.
So, I used to be an investment banker, and from my personal experience of heightened levels of stress, I led me to burnout and noticing how the stress was starting to affect my body. And that's really when I was led down the wellness journey. First and foremost, it was for my own self-healing. And, I came in contact with different ways of self-healing and different ways of finding a balance again, and putting my health in the center point of my life rather than just noticing it once something breaks down. And then once I got onto that journey, I was so inspired that I decided not to go back into finance and instead to help propagate this, because I feel like it was something that there was a gap in the market. I would see my colleagues and they would be equally stressed and equally burnt out, but the ways in which they were coping were very different. So I wanted to really allow them an access point of healing from within, and that really brings about a management or a balancing from the stress with when it comes to stress related illnesses. So that led me to launch Inspire Yoga about 10 years ago now. And we focus on customized programs. So customized programs of yoga, breath work, meditation. So it's creating that symbiosis, like a symbiotic approach of mindfulness and movement, bringing both of them together in the same platform. And then organically we grew, and we're also offering corporate wellness, taking it from, instead of just the one-on-one individual coaching, to now working with organizations and groups of teams to really bring about a collective heightened awareness around energy, around health, around creating boundaries that are sustainable.
So you, as you probably know, Neelam, Oscar and I are a little bit skeptical about some of the well washing that goes on, where it's just like buy a yoga mat and get on with it. So I'd like to sort of start, because you've obviously gone through that stress and that burnout and fade out experience yourself. So you obviously take it very seriously. So if it's not too painful, can you just explore that sort of that experience that brought you into this world? What actually did you go through?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was a derivatives trader, and the constant pressure of time with the market moving and just being able to chase prices. I was on the trading floor in my early 20s, very at one side very proud of my achievements for being there and pioneering a sense of bringing women into the trading floor where it's quite masculine or a very male dominated area. And what really, I don't know, I felt like I was just noticing how all of us, we were suppressing stress. Whether it was just relying on caffeinating through our day in order to keep that alertness or our attention high. I had colleagues next to me stand on their standing desks, others sitting on a stability ball. So, it was very clear that there was some breakdown in the body in terms of physical pain and tension, whether it was neck, whether it was shoulders, but more often around the spinal column with back pain. And that's something that really triggered me too. I experienced chronic lower back pain in my mid-20s, to the point where, my friends would be out dancing the night away and I was literally just limping home. Another thing that really made a difference was, or something that, we can kind of have it under wraps and just say, oh yeah, I'm okay, I'm coping, things are okay. But one of the trigger points for me was also just feeling exhausted from, it doesn't matter if I've had 6 hours, 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours, 14 hours of sleep, waking up and not feeling that I was ever at a charging station, that I ever felt rejuvenated in my energy. So I was just feeling like I was going from a sense of depletion to further depletion, where it obviously affected my mood, it affected my relationships. I wasn't able to bring my best to any scenario, because physically I didn't have the capacity to, or I was also in pain as well as that. So I think that's the point that feel, okay, I need to draw a line. But having said that, Richard, there was so much pride as well of being part of this job and being part of the industry, and connecting at a level where, oh, everyone looked at me with a sense of esteem. Oh, you've accomplished so much so young. So it was very, very hard for me, even though I could see the deterioration. It was very hard for me to separate from that role, to separate from me as a banker, and then I really saw the importance of being well, in terms of not just for ourselves or how we feel, but also what we bring to our workplace. Right. So very, very quickly, I couldn't bring my A game to the workplace. I was missing trades. I was feeling demotivated. I wasn't able to really be excited about the projects that we were undergoing. And so, of course, that led me to also feeling really unfulfilled in the workplace. So this was around GFC time. So lo and behold, I was laid off, and getting that redundancy slip was almost like a weight lifted off my shoulders, because it was a decision I couldn't make on my own. My pride was getting in the way to actually separate and say, okay, I need time for myself. But it was also an opening for me, because it was literally that same day that my yoga teacher had said, oh, Neelam, you've been practicing for 12 years now. I think it's time to be a teacher, or you're ready to be a teacher. And it was then where I rolled my eyes and I thought, I can't quit my day job. But that for me was such an indication of timing and synchronicity. And that's the first thing I remembered once I was free from the job. I said, oh, now I have the time and I have the capacity, and I want to do this for me, just to invest in the summer to bring myself to feeling whole again. But lo and behold, the journey changed from there.
So I want to probe a little deeper into one of the things you said, partly out of selfish self-interest, is it's something I research myself, but this idea that you both loved and hated the experience of being in the bank. And the fact that you couldn't let go of your pride and do this yourself. So I'm just wondering if this, these intense feelings, this is ambivalence, strong, ambi, both, valent, strength. So these both strengths, do you feel that was potentially pulling you apart?
Oh yeah, for sure. There was that inner conflict, and I think that compounds to stress too, where you, on the one side, that it's an ego boost. It's something that, you're so attached to, but then on the other side, that it's not good for you. It's actually draining. It was actually draining me. So I definitely saw that inner conflict is really where the stress came from. When we're at the workplace and we are aligned to the values of the work, we can pull all-nighters but feel energized by the work because we're so excited. I've done that as a startup. I've done that launching my business, but it wasn't about the workload. It was more about the rumination, that inner struggle of, oh, I don't want to be here, but I have to. That sense of head and heart as well being polarized, that really created much more of a stress response, because there wasn't an inner integrity that I was operating from.
So one more question before we go down into how you solve this. If you hadn't been laid off because of the GFC, where might you have gone? How much darker might it have got?
100%. That's why I really feel that you know, getting being made redundant was such a blessing for me, because it was a line drawn in the sand for myself, right? And I felt a relief, but I also didn't have the courage to draw that line myself. I honestly, that's a very good question, and I can't tell you in hindsight. I can't tell you what my parameter would be, because I could see the impact it was having on my relationships. I could see the impact it was having on my health, on my the physical tension, the physical pain that I was undergoing every day. I remember even at the time, you know, my parents were like, is this all worth it? But then I think it was the celebration of, oh, I've worked so hard. I've done so much. All of my studying and, you know, being at LSE brought me to this place. I can't now throw it away. It's almost like that surrender is a weakness, right? And so I guess I know there were days on the trading floor where I was experiencing panic attacks. I was experiencing heart palpitations. I was definitely experiencing a restlessness in sleep, issues with my gut health. But when is it too much? That's a big question, because even now with clients that I see, a lot of the time they come to me not because they come with a proactive sense, but because they've been admitted into hospital, or because their doctors are saying, this is what you need. You know, it's almost being administered for them. So I think that's also why such a big part of the vision that I have is around self-awareness. Because we'll, you know, with these blinders on, we let the ego, or we let our sense of pride take over our sense of self. And then it can be a very dark road, you know, where thankfully there was a way out for me. But for a lot of people, you know, I see that even with substance abuse, it just becomes such a strong coping mechanism that it's very difficult to change paths.
So it's interesting what you thought would give you sense, sort of coherence and purpose and meaning wasn't giving it to you, but you get locked into believing that maybe it still will, and it's still, if you keep on doing it, it'll come, even though all of the evidence is otherwise, that it's breaking you down. I wonder if that was going through your mind, it'll eventually get there, the purpose will be there.
I think for me, it was letting go of the notion that money will solve everything.
Okay.
So it wasn't for me, it wasn't that, oh, okay, one day I will feel fulfilled in my job. The feeling that, oh, without this fat paycheck, am I still me?
That's a very interesting reflection. Without the fat paycheck, am I still me?
To my self-worth at that time. And so
we just lost a bit then, Neelam. Can we just go back to
yeah, so I think for me, it was also my relationship with money, you know, seeing that paycheck as such a security blanket, that it was coming from a place of fear to let it go, rather than a place of fulfillment of what I'm going to do next, you know? And so I definitely did equate my self-worth to my net worth. And when that happened, then it's so intertwined, you know? And so it's no longer about feeling that inner coherence, but really about maybe chasing the carrot and continuously going in that sense.
Fascinating, thanks.
Yeah.
Neelam, yeah, you covered quite a few different things here. One thing that you mentioned, so you were now clearly very successful at a young age, and now you basically transformed yourself into an entrepreneur. I just wonder, I mean, I now know this is always really hard, right? But if you look in hindsight, if someone else would have spoken with you, would you have changed? Because if you talk now to people that come to you, and they're in a similar situation as you, they're stressed, they're overworked, they're depleted, they don't have the energy. How do you actually help them? Because if someone would have come to you, let's say 10 years ago, what would have made the difference in terms of what you do right now with other people?
So that's why such a big approach that we take is around mindfulness as well as movement, because the whole purpose for me when it comes to yoga or when it comes to practice is holding a mirror up, right? And creating that sense of self-awareness of, okay, where is the stress coming from? And for me to see that underlying fear, and what is the fear of, breaking down this role because it's attached to pride, or it's attached to a false sense of security, or maybe a limiting belief that I can't do anything else. I've worked 10 years to get to here. I can't now just up and leave. So more than giving people the solution, we just bring a sense of awareness of, okay, when we understand ourselves on a deeper level, then we're able to sculpt better solutions for ourselves. Rather than it being a one-stop shop, it's about dynamically exploring and understanding, okay, where am I right now? How can I just make micro changes to make an impact or a difference in terms of how I feel? And so a lot of it is also just energetically, how do I feel when I sit here? Do I feel like I'm expanded in this role, or do I feel quite constricted and quite tight? And that tightness is what we try to help release, and that's why the movement comes, and that's why even the work comes, so that we can breathe a bit deeper, we can feel a bit more, we can move with more expression as well. So yeah, I think quick answer is self-awareness. If we don't know ourselves, what we're experiencing, and we just keep going on a continuous loop, then we can never get out of it. So that understanding is so important.
So there seems to be two things that you're breaking it down into. One is this awareness of a sense of self at multiple levels,
Mm-hmm.
and two is a re-energizing of. I mean, are they separate, or are they integrated? What do you do to help people have this awareness of the sense of self, and what do you do to help people re-energize?
That's brilliant. That's a brilliant question, Richard. One word: meditation. So when we're moving into a practice of meditation, that brings us, what we do is we start to delete a lot of the roles that we're playing. We're just being here and being now, right? It's not about what we're doing. It's not about what we're creating. It's not about the regrets of the past or the worries of the future. It's right now. And so in that stillness, in that quiet, that's where we recalibrate, and that's in that meditative state is also where we finally plug into that charging station. It's when we are able to feel a much deeper energy than what ends up draining us. I'm sure there were days where I would just sit on the couch, but there was so much going on in my mind that I'd be exhausted, not even lifting a finger, right? So this is exactly the antithesis of that. Sitting and being so clear and so open, without the concepts, without the mental chatter, so that we can connect to a much deeper energy as well. So yeah, you're right. We can only get to that place, we can only get to that charging station when we are aware that it is there, right? When we are aware that actually these thoughts, the constant jittery, anxious kind of rumination, it's not helping me. It's actually taking away from my energy. So when we have the awareness that we can actually sit back and witness, we don't have to jump onto each train of thought. We can witness and let it pass and feel more of an open, quiet entrainment, then that that itself is energizing.
Okay, so one level is quieting the mental chatter. So what actually happens to mental chatter when you go back to that work self? That when the self is fragmented or split or the lack of coherence. What is this mental chatter saying to people? Have you got any examples of what's going on inside their head that you need to quieten?
Absolutely. I think it's that sense of like, I'm doing, right? And so, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I'm handling this, I'm managing that. And in all of that doership, if that's really what we're kind of attached to as our primary role, then is it ever enough, right? What are we oscillating between? As somebody who achieves and accomplishes, and we're only in that primary role, what two states are we accomplishing it? What two states are we oscillating emotionally? It's fear or greed, right? And you can distill that down to, it's not enough. Either I'm not enough, what's in my bank is not enough, where my my kids' accomplishments, they're not enough. Everything is about aggrandizement, right? You're always creating more and more, but is it ever enough, right? So I'll connect with tycoons. I'll coach, high level executives, and they still have that. And then all the way and on the juniors, they still have that. So this is such a recurring thought. Is it ever enough? And when we can come out of those cycles of fear and greed, and we can be, then when we're right now and we can be right here, then you feel that enoughness, you feel that wholesomeness, because you're no longer in the chase. So I think I feel like that really precipitates with so many, obviously with my experience, but also so many of the clients that we've worked with in the past, dealing with stress, dealing with anxiety, depression. It's a sense that whatever is done, no matter how glorious their achievements are, there's an inadequacy that's left. And constantly connecting to that inadequacy as your motivating driver is exhausting.
I just wonder as well, because I know we all based here in Hong Kong, for the viewers and listeners, in terms of the environment and context, because Hong Kong is well probably known for being a city that's driven by greed and money, or at least the finance industry is really high on the list. So how do you deal with that if you literally as an individual basically at the center of what the problem is?
Absolutely, 100%, Oscar. I think that's why even like the catchphrase of Inspire Yoga, it's all about creating an antidote for the fast-paced lifestyle. This go, go, go mentality, this sense of running around and just frantically being in action, whether it's at work or even socially, just filling up the calendar. So what we try to do is create an oasis of time with yourself, right? Time where you can stop on your functioning level, and you can have time to recalibrate. And that's also when you create space, mental space and physical space, to also navigate where is it that I want to go, rather than just feeling like you're on a treadmill and the speedometer is going up and up and up. Actually stop and say, where am I going? What is the destination? Right? And so that when we have that sense of purpose, that also really drives our motivation, but also drives our energy, because there's a value alignment there.
So it's really interesting in the treadmill, because you've talked. There's a number of metaphors. It's the idea of doing, and the treadmill, and far and speed, and and I think the world is going in that direction. So more doing, you know, it's the idea of do not think, and action, and an action bias everywhere, and the VUCA, the speed of the world.
Absolutely.
So if you do you see this becoming a sort of a society-wide challenge, that we're going to end up with a bunch of people struggling to find meaning across entire societies, or indeed are we already there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why they call it a rat race, right? We're just constantly in action, and yeah, there is a part of us that is called to engage. It's called to act and to do and to create. But we are human beings, right? So also giving ourselves that necessary time to be in that space. And I think that helps to also kind of channelize how our efforts are optimized in the doing. So for me, that's what spirituality means. It's not about creating a hermitage and being recluse and switching off to the material world. It's about how we can be agile, how we can be flexible in when we do it with 100%. And then when we charge, we actually do give ourselves that 100% recharge, so that it propels. It's like a springboard. It propels how high we jump, but then also how deep we come to know ourselves as well. With the way the world is at the moment, and the levels of mental health issues, I would suggest that we are there. We are at a place where we've celebrated the doership so much, but at what cost, right? Because as I said, I'll have people who are so accomplished come to me, and they're breaking down. They're coming to me for depression, or they're coming to me for anxiety, because they feel so uncomfortable just being by themselves. And I think this has also been a real eye-opening time with COVID and the lockdowns, that we're so used to running, we're so used to being everywhere, that now having that guard down and saying, no, you have to adhere to social distancing, we have to adhere to a lockdown, you can't go out as much as you want to. That's been very, very confronting for a lot of people. And that's where also you see that loneliness spike, because they're not used to sitting by themselves. Why? Because how confronting is it to put a mirror to your mind, right? You're now challenged by all the thoughts that you were entertaining, but before, we would be in a place where we could easily distract. We could easily numb ourselves, move away from all of the I'm not good enough thought patterns. 70% of what we entertain in our mind is negative. Think about a good thing and have that sit. Have a bad experience, even a year, 2 years later, we remember it with such detail, right? We recall, and we have this negative bias, even neurologically, when it comes to the mind, to think of the bad. And so when in that way, we've been so used to kind of deflecting that by distracting and keeping ourselves busy, that we don't have to actually sensitize to what it is that we're thinking about, that now it's become such a huge problem around mental health. So I definitely think that this time has been a time of reflection. How have we been operating, and how sustainable are these operating systems? What are we searching for? At the end of the day, whatever we do, we're searching for happiness, right? We want a sense of happiness. We want a sense of fulfillment from what we do. But, you know, it doesn't matter how many zeros there are in your bank balance. It's no guarantee for happiness. It doesn't matter, you know, you can have your favorite chocolate cake, 1 slice, 2 slices, 3 slices. There's a diminishing margin from the external. And you know that there's a deep reservoir of joy, and it's always from within, right? Because if it was a one size fits all, then we would all be searching for the same thing or the same magic pill or whatever to give us the happiness. But we all see that, or we connect to it in different ways. And so, you know, a meaningful conversation with a good friend, that could bring me such fulfillment. For you, maybe just walking in nature for half an hour can give you such fulfillment. So it's about finally understanding that a sense of happiness is really derived from our inner environment, rather than having to manufacture a specific external environment that we tend to be bought into.
I see huge parallels with what you're saying to Brené Brown's work on being the anxious generation and the numb generation simultaneously. Because we're anxious, we numb, and you know, and so you get locked into this spiral of anxiety, numb it, more anxiety, numb it, things in my head saying I'm not good enough, etc., etc. So I see huge parallels. And you know, and her is one of the most popular TED Talks ever. So it's obviously suggests, as you said, there's society. This is a societal level thing.
Yeah.
So assuming that most people who would listen to this sort of recognize some of this in themselves, what doorway opening tactics might there be to help them take these first steps into self-awareness and meditation and yoga and the kind of stuff you do?
Yeah, thanks for that. I mean, even when I was in college, I remember being really anxious about my exams. And just as a way of procrastinating, I would roll out my mat and I would do some yoga practice. And I realized how the movement helped to almost let go of the jitters, so that when I sat to revise, I was more focused, and it was clearer in my mind. So movement is definitely something that, you know, we can all prescribe to, and it doesn't have to be, you know, training for a marathon. As I said, just a simple walk, just a few stretches. It's basically to bring an awareness to what's going on physically, tangibly, because how often do we notice our body when we're well? But how often do we notice our body when we're in pain, right? It's almost a signal. So I would say definitely, you know, just bringing a sense of movement so that we can connect to that body and mind, you know, and that wholesomeness there. For me, a big turning point was when I really discovered breathwork. That was basically when I learned that each of our emotions, before we react, the first place that we hold it is our breath. Think about it. How does your breath respond when you're angry versus when you're sad? You know, there's the heaviness when we're sad, or when we're feeling joyful, there's a lightness, right? And so we hold so much of that emotional kind of backlog in our breath, but sometimes we don't, because we're so used to numbing, we don't even realize that that's the emotional vibration that we carry. So by disrupting our regular breathing pattern and recreating it helps to recreate and almost distill away from any of the emotions that we've been carrying in the back burner. So I think breath work works magically. Simply noticing your breath, you know, and a simple count, you know, just breathing in for 4 and breathing out for 8. The inhalations are activating, so it works with the sympathetic nervous system, and the exhalations are relaxing. So working with the parasympathetic nervous system. So I tend to, with my clients, I tend to elongate the breath out because they're already in a place of stress. But for somebody who maybe is feeling lethargic, who's feeling exhausted, active inhalations would work beautifully as well. So, a simple count like inhale for 4, exhale for 8, just to again reset and bring a bit more emphasis to that rest response, to the rest digest response, so that we can kind of find that equilibrium again and finding our balance. And then when we're more entrained with the breath, we realize that our mind becomes much more focused. So, if you're breathing and you're noticing your breath, can you be planning for the agenda you've got on tomorrow? The moment you're in the future, you've lost the present, right? So the breath is such a beautiful tool to entrain the mind to stay in the present, because the moment you are swaying between past and future, you're no longer aware, where you're no longer feeling that tangible experience of the present. And that's why the breath for me is the vehicle of connecting mind and body, because we can first feel the expansion of the inhalation, the contraction of the exhalation in the body, and then it connects the mind because it stays still, it stays present, and it stays focused.
Neelam, yeah, so you mentioned a little bit more about the practice of breath work. But what I'd like to know as well, I'm fairly curious that you said there was a point where you started focusing more on breath work. Why was that? Why would you not know what was that point where you, hey, this breath work is actually more relevant than I initially thought?
Yeah, amazing. So for me, even the practice of yoga, yoga, the definition now becomes it, or the connotation is so much around, okay, what you do on the mat, your asanas or your practice or your postures and your poses and how bendy you are and whether you can balance on one leg or whether you can stand upside down. That's such a big connotation of what yoga is. But actually, yoga in Sanskrit is yug, which is unite. And what are we uniting? We're uniting body and mind. So if we're still on the mat with that anxious mentality, then what good is this practice? It's the same as competing for a sport. There's a reason why yoga is not in the Olympics. It's not competitive, right? It's a place where we can draw inward, where we can access our own awareness of what's happening. What do I need? How do I find my balance? How do I connect to my own wellspring of joy? And so for me, breath is so important because it connects the movement, but then it also connects the mind, right? So the unification is front and center to the practice. It's body and mind, because I'll have clients who have come after practicing in a studio for 8-9 years, and they've come because they've injured themselves. Oh, how come you stretched so far? The person next to me could reach their nose to their knees. So I felt like I need to, because after so long, I need to show that I can do more. I can do these advanced poses. And so this to me is, again, you're operating from the sense of the ego. It's not about what you're doing on a material level. It's about how that material plane can bring a gateway to the more transcendental, to the more to a deeper connection. So the breath work for me is so important because it clears the mind. It brings a physical awareness, but then it also is the stepping stone. So the first stepping stone of yoga is the asana. So first you have to go from gross to subtle. So you have to go from what's most tangible? Your body. Okay, we can be aware of our body through the poses. Once we're aware of the body, then let's graduate to the next stage. It's like doing, primary 1 200 times. You want to go to primary 2. You want to go further in your education. So after you graduate from the postures, then you go to the breath. Then you take more of you understand the subtleties of when is it that I'm holding my breath? Oh, when I'm scared, I hold my breath. So you notice, oh, when I'm scared and I'm holding my breath, what if I breathe? Then I can release my fear. So you start to notice the relationship between your emotions, your mind, and the breath. And then once we're kind of more versed or more practiced with breath work, then we enter the phase of meditation. So it is like a gradual approach, and you need all three in different stages. But then you're at a place where now don't just stay there and keep assessing and keep judging and keep planning on the breath. Let it go, and then you come to a place of being. And that's where you really see those spikes in the gamma rays, or how the brain functions too. You're not in beta, you're not in just that stress mode, but you're able to actually transcend that to really feeling a heightened energy, but also allowing a sense of surrender to the planning, to the doing, to the process, and just experience that that joy, or that energy from that stillness, from the nothingness. And how, when you're in a place of such joy, watching a sunset or enjoying your favorite food, there's a moment of blankness, right? There's that moment of quiet in the mind. So that's what meditation gets to, that quiet. And, that's something that I really propagate now, because so many of, our clients and the people that we deal with are suffering from insomnia, are suffering from a place where they can't switch off their mental chatter. And we need both. We need that action to do, but we also need inaction. We also need surrender to allow sleep to come, right? The more we say, oh, I'm going to sleep 10 more hours, 5 more hours, the more anxious we become lying down, knowing full well that the body and the mind need the rest. But when do we allow that permission? So that's the kind of process in which we take them through movement, through mindfulness, and then meditation.
So this is going to take me in a slightly different direction than I was expecting to go, but let's see if it works. So at one level, you're talking about this sort of transcendental awareness of self and body and the mind-body combination, which is part of the rest and rejuvenation process to enable people to have that cognitive ability on a regular basis, etc., which is wonderful, that transcendental thing. I'm looking more at sort of the return of investment here. If someone was bringing you in to do that, yes, at one level they can sort of relax and do that kind of work. But I'm interested in more in instead of the transcendental, the poise.
Yeah.
So when you're in the middle of the busyness and the doing, what can you do to activate to these moments where you're able to have better ideation, and you're able to calm down and manage people in a way that's far more useful than this panicky rushing, I've got no time. So do you see evidence of that poise as well as the transcendental moment?
The transcendental state is one side of things, but I feel like the objective is poise. It's equipoise. In the Yoga Sutras, that's what we're calling that fine middle ground, where we're optimizing the right and left brain. We're using the whole brain when it comes to ideation. But in order to do that, we need that transcendental side, because that's where it's almost like the muscle. We exercise that. So, exercising your physical muscles, so that at a point of crisis, you can run, you can sprint, your muscles are ready to take on that load, right? And so that's exactly why the practice is there. The practice is not there. You're not doing yoga, or you're not in that, it's not that, oh, I've practiced, I'm done, and here I go back to my stress zone. The practice is there. So it's our warm-up. It's our way of connecting to disconnecting, so that in the thick of things, in the vortex, we can create a moment where we're in the eye, where we're still, where we're calm. And then we can come from a place of responding rather than reacting. We can create better decisions, and we can see things more holistically, or with a wider lens, rather than holding on to, coming from a place of fear, coming from a place of greed. You create more of a wider vision. So even in the Transcendental, we're connecting to ourselves, feeling that quiet within, and then realizing that we share that in common with everybody, right? So it's also expanding our lens, rather than just seeing me and mine, to then see we and ours. So when we are in a corporate environment, when we are working in organizations, we can aspire in the collective goal, rather than, as we see so much, just trying to cut the biggest slice for ourselves. And so I really see that it's as I said, like, the beauty of all of this is the agility of how we can go from the material to the transcendental, the transactional to the transcendental. And that, to me, is why you're flexing this muscle, is why you're exercising it, so that we can be agile in the movement. And when it's getting too transactional, or where we're feeling, okay, this is really my ego driving, we can take a step back, we can recalibrate, we can find the wholeness, and then we can make a decision, or we can respond from that place.
I think your passion when you're talking about this, the last couple of questions, the energy in you is just gone up about 4 levels. So the passion in this is clear. So sort of a couple of questions now is one is how do you transmit that passion to busy executives so that they understand it? I mean, that's the key challenge, I think, for the work that you're doing.
Yeah.
And 2, which we'll sort of go to second, and it is the energy that you're talking, that I've just seen in you. Is that what you're creating in other people, in the work, about the work they do and the life they live?
So how do we create this, right? How do we share this energy? And you can read books about it, we can intellectualize it, we can compare and contrast. And this is all still on the same domain, which is the level of the mind. So my objective here is not so much to convince you that, oh, there's another way of managing your stress. There's a way where you can be poised in your decision making and feel a real fullness of life. It's my objective is to make you experience it, because it's the experience that will be the driver. Otherwise, it's just one more thing on your to-do list. Okay, got to do my 10 breaths because this is what my yoga coach has told me, or this is what I've been told will help lower my blood pressure, And so it's about that experience. So then it becomes integrated in your lifestyle. And, amidst all of this, I've never been a morning person. I've always loved my lions. But once I connected to my practice, I'm up at 5:30 before the kids are awake to do my practice, so that I feel whole, so that I can give from a place of abundance, right? You can only give what you have. If I'm in pain, I'm going to give pain. If I feel content, that's what I'm going to share. So it's that. I want to give you that experience, so that that's what you operate from. And then the experience itself should is your driving force, is why you do it again, not because it's indoctrinated, not because it's out of sheer willpower, but you create a self-discipline. You put it on yourself because you can see how it changes the fabric of your day. And that's exactly what we're trying to do. Yeah, absolutely. We go into organizations and we bring, of course, we first have to adhere to the intellectual mind, right? We first have to meet you where you're at, but then it's about up leveling too, right? So first we'll talk about how emotions affect us. What's the interchanging relationship between emotions and energy? How we can create more like of a positive mindset. But then I want to bring you to an experience of stillness so that you feel, oh, actually, I'm fine as I am. I'm great where I am. And I want to operate from that place of greatness. And rather than a feeling empty, rather than feeling a lack and operating out of a scarcity mindset. And so that's really what we, engender in the programs that we offer on the corporate level. Experience it, see the difference, try it out. And there's a huge benefit in doing it collectively because you have an accountability partner. There's somebody you can talk about. Oh, you look like you're dealing with a lot. Try that 10-minute breathing exercise. See how it works for you. It made me feel so rested. I could go to sleep so much faster than I used to. And it's these things, right? It's these things. Once we're aware of the causation, then we're more prescribed to trying it on and keeping it because it fits better. And so that's exactly what we're trying to do. Obviously, it has to come from a top-down approach where people can now talk about it, can share their experiences, and they have these role models that allow it, right? Rather than sneaking out for a 20-minute break so that they can do their meditation. If it's widespread and it's open and it's encouraged, then, just imagine the levels of stress or the operating energy in that office or in that workplace. So, yeah.
That also brings me to Neelam, to the last question that I have for you. You spoke quite a bit about experience, but also imagination, right? So imagine what this could look like. So I want to actually looking forward. I guess well-being in the industry that you're in has developed over the last few decades. And so I'd like to hear from you how you see this developing over the, let's say, the next 2-3 decades going forward, and especially the experience part you're referring to, how that evolves at sort of organizational level.
Yeah. No, it's it's an exciting world ahead. I mean, even now it's been a huge disruption, right? Where we've actually taken this time to reflect on what works and what doesn't, and where we thought there were hard and fast rules. Now there are gray areas, or we have noticed that, okay, we don't have to be fixed at a certain location at a certain time in order to be productive. So I have seen just so much change, especially in the last, I would say, like 5 years. Before, to get someone to come to a yoga class, it would have to be a promise of, okay, flat abs, strong back, toned legs. It was all about the physicality. Now there's such a shift into mental health, and I really see that as the forefront. Because, I mean, as I said, starting with the gross and going more subtle, right? And so now, even with the coronavirus, we've come to such a standstill globally because there's a threat on our physical health, right? what about the mental health pandemic that we're enduring? Right? There's a clear symptom. Oh, okay, symptoms of pneumonia. So that's all of these things are heaviness of breath. And so that's why there's fear around the coronavirus. But what about how contagious even a negative vibration can be? You could sit and be upset with something that happened. You take that feeling of resentment or anger or frustration, you go home, you let it out on your spouse, your kids, your cat. There's like a spiral of the contagion of emotion. And so I think that's really where we're at now, starting to understand our mental environment is also our responsibility to upkeep. We talk about dental hygiene. What about mental hygiene? What are we doing to clear away from all the load that we're carrying in our vibration, in our energy, in our thoughts? Because that will affect our relationships, that will affect our capacity, our productivity, and our efficiency. And so I've definitely seen much more of a stimulus around meditation, around mindfulness, around clearing and cleansing from a thought level, but then also going a little deeper and understanding, where are our motivations? What emotional frequency are we holding? And what is the driver? Is it something that, as I said, is it fear? Is it fight or flight? Is it coming from stress? Or is coming from joy? Is it coming from a sense of contribution? I know that for me was a huge distinction in my life. I felt like so much of my dissatisfaction being in finance was because I didn't feel like I was making a meaningful difference to anybody else, and that we were just all, eyes on end of year bonus. And so it was all about me and mine. Once I moved and just started teaching yoga, literally, Oscar, I just put up flyers around my neighborhood, not even knowing who would show up. And there would be times where no one would come. And there would be times where 5, 6 people would come. But the amount of fulfillment I had, knowing that in 1 hour, I could help someone connect to their breath a little deeper, connect to that, just a semblance of inner peace, or connect to the strength in their back so they're no longer feeling back pain, to change on these very small ways, but making big differences. And it was in that sense of contribution that, honestly led me to where I am with the team and with the programs that we have on offer now. But I think when we're able to then move from a selfish kind of fear-based mentality to a more selfless, community-wide contribution mentality, that's where I see wellness really start to pivot in terms of the values and the vision of what companies and individuals can do.
Thanks, Neelam. That was fascinating answer, and I think you're very right about the toxic behaviours and emotions. I think the research suggests they're at least 3 times more contagious than the positive behaviours and emotions. So it means if you're toxic, then everybody else becomes toxic. But if you're positive, then everybody gives you all the work to do. So either way, sadly, you lose. Which sort of takes me to my last question, which is the one we ask everyone, which is we frame it as the $9 trillion question. In that, contemporary organisations are probably behaviour in contemporary organisations is costing them about $9 trillion a year across the OECD. So the way I understand what you're talking about, it's creating this transcendental and poised self that has energy to do the work. Mm-hmm. If we were doing that as part of organisational practice across the globe, what kind of world would we be living in?
A world where everyone would have a deep sense of belonging. You know, I think so much of what we're experiencing now is a sense of isolation, because it's up to us to have our back, to ensure that we have enough to pay our bills, to stand out in some way for that recognition. So I would actually say it would be a world where we would have a deep sense of belonging, because we'd be using the right and the left brain. We'd be operating from a place of balance. That also really sparks not only intelligence, but intuition. It really brings about a direction where there's a coherence in what we're thinking, feeling, and doing. And this is the principle of integrity, right? If there's no inner conflict within, if we're not carrying stress within us, we're carrying smiles on our faces. What would the world be like where everyone has a smile on our face? Would there be space for violence? Wouldn't it be a much, much more peaceful place?
Well, it's certainly a world I want to live in. I don't know about you, Oscar.
Sounds fantastic, Neelam. Thanks a lot for your time, Neelam. Really enjoyed this conversation. It was a very different one than one we usually have, but it was very inspiring. Richard as well, thanks a lot. And
Thank you both. Thank you both. Thank you.